Good day, everybody. It's Calxiyn here, and today we are going to be talking about a theory made by Grimrose Flaming on Twitter that Cinder is related to the female Atlas scientist that is depicted in a photo with Watts, Pietro, and the other scientist team. And if you guys enjoyed this video, remember that you guys should subscribe for more RWBY videos, check out our Patreon to support the channel directly, and follow me over on Twitter, because that tends to be where the theories start these days. And I usually give like a brief cliff notes on my opinion about a theory that I see over on Twitter, and then I make that into a full video later. So we have a lot of community discussion going on Twitter, like, hey guys, what do you guys think about this theory? Like something like that, right? And you guys know that I love theories that have to do with like blood relations, right? We've done a theory on, hey, is Adam Jacques' son? Are Jacques and Ironwood are Watts and Ironwood related? Are Jacques and Watts related? Like, we did a bunch of those. So Grimrose Flaming basically made the point on Twitter that both of these characters, right, Cinder and this random scientist lady, have black hair, they both have black clothing, they both have yellow golden eyes, pale white skin, and are most likely the same size and height. And I totally agree that when you look at the picture, this woman looks a lot like Cinder. And something I want to talk about is, in RWBY, the parents' like signature color, like the colors that they wear or are represented by, like when you think of Raven, you think black and red, and then when you think of Taiyang, you would think of yellow, and he has blonde hair and all that sort of stuff. And so Watts in this photo is wearing one of his colors, which is like purple and yellow for Watts. And he has the sort of yellow turtleneck. Pietro is wearing basically what he always wears, right? And so I feel like that sort of matters, that all of these things combined matter a lot. Because when you think about it, this lady could have had any combination of these three things, right? She could have like had a different skin tone. She could have had a completely different eye color. Like if she had black hair and like bright green eyes or something, I wouldn't immediately think Cinder. But she has the three things, like the three exact same things, or four if we include skin color as well. She has the four exact things that Cinder has, especially Cinder right now, because Cinder's wearing this sort of like black cloak and all that stuff, and she didn't really wear that before. Like when I think of Cinder, I used to think of red. Now her costume has changed a lot. And so when you think about it, like, really, is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that this scientist lady has all of these things in common with Cinder? Like, I don't think that it is, because they could have done anything. They could have been like, okay, let's give this character like two different color eyes, let's give her blue eyes, let's give her pink hair. Like, they could have done literally anything, but they made her look basically as much like Cinder as they possibly could have, right? So I'm just like, I don't know. I think that that's a little suspicious. I think that's a little telling. Again, if it was any other combination, I don't think that it would be as big of a deal. But because it basically checks all of those boxes, like they could have done anything, but they decided to do this, and I find that very suspicious. And so now I want to sort of expand, because that was just their tweet. Like, that was all that they pointed out. But I want to talk about the implications of this being real and what that means for Cinder's backstory and everything like that. Now, here's what I find interesting about the photograph specifically. It's that we see Cinders Mom basically like touching Pietro on the shoulder, as well as that other guy touching Pietro on the shoulder. Well, Watts sort of like he's giving them this look, like shooting daggers at them and all that stuff. And so could it be possible that this lady was a bit more friendly with Pietro, that she is one of the scientists that backed Pietro's project? Because I think that from what we know, right, there were a bunch of projects being presented, and Pietro's basically one, if you want to call it that, right? And so if it was down to like 3 projects, let's just pretend, Watts' project, maybe that other guy on the other side who's wearing the blue like thing under his lab coat, like the turtleneck, I guess, and then Pietro. So Pietro, Watts, and then some other random person, right? All presented these to Ironwood. You would think that if there's 5 scientists in this photo, but let's say they are 10, that they would sort of split up into factions and give their say on which project is most feasible or which project makes the most sense to do. You know what I mean? So basically my idea is that this lady and that other guy, they're both touching Pietro's shoulders, and so what if it's like they supported Pietro's project, they backed Pietro's project? Like, maybe all 5 of them had to think of projects for Ironwood, and like this lady's project got rejected, and so now as she's looking at sort of the 3 projects or 4 projects which are left over, she's like, I think I like Pietro's the best. I will like co-sign on Pietro's project. That's sort of how I imagine it, right? And maybe that's a reach, but look at everyone's body language in that photo, right? Like, I just feel like that's important. The other thing is, if we're talking about body language, I don't know if this is a reach, but Watts has both hands in his pockets, you know, and he's like looking with these, like, you know, this disgusted almost expression, or this, like, like, this expression on his face. Not disgusted, but, like, jealous, like, he's clearly, like, not happy with them. And the other guy is sort of standing very casually with his hand like this on Pietro. But the lady that we think is Cinder's mom has one pocket in her jacket and then one pocket, or one hand on Pietro's shoulder. So, I don't know, maybe I'm looking into that too much, but could that mean that she's, like, a little two-sided? Does that make sense? Like, she seems like she's openly supporting Pietro on one side, but yet her hand is in her pocket, like Watts' hands are in his pockets. Like, could that be a thing? Like, does that make sense? Is that too crazy? I don't know. But that's what I'm sort of thinking. It would be very interesting if this scientist worked on the Penny Project with Pietro and is Cinder's mom. And Miles and Carrie have told us to basically, like, think Cinderella when we think of Cinder, and we haven't really gotten her backstory yet. But what I've been basically thinking is, you know, if you're working on something that's, like, top secret like this, wouldn't you have to kind of stay there, you know? Like, the way I'm thinking about it is like, hey, if you work on the Penny Project, you need to stay here, you need to stay on the military base, like, this is top secret, you can't go, like, you can't go back with your family and all that stuff, right? One of those things, because there are, like, people in fictional militaries, but also, I'm pretty sure real-life military that need to, like, stay put, you know what I mean, and can't go home for fear of, like, this is, like, classified, top secret level information type situation, right? And it would be interesting, then, if, like, Cinder's mom married a man, and that man had, like, the 2 kids, so, like, Cinderella inspiration, and the mom was like, well, I have to go work on this top secret project, so your stepdad's gonna take care of you, and that is when Cinder was sort of abused and neglected, and the Cinderella story really popped out right there, because the mom was taken away from the household and working on this top secret military project and not allowed to sort of go back into Atlas and interact and all that stuff, because that's also, like, that would be a big, like, problem, right? If Salem or even, like, another kingdom, like, kidnapped a scientist and was like, tell us everything you know about the Penny Project, right? And this scientist was like, right? So I doubt that they'd be allowed to go back home. That's how I imagine it, right? And I feel like that could have built the resentment that Cinder has for the people in power, for the military, because, like, she goes hard on Ironwood, right? Like, in Volume 3, she's, like, this tyrant, this dictator, like, she goes for it, you know what I'm saying? And so, when you think about that, like, Ironwood wants to be as strong as possible. That is why they are making a synthetic army. And if Ironwood had a different desire and wasn't a tyrant, as Cinder says, the Penny Project wouldn't have continued, because this is all about, like, being the most powerful, you know? And I think the idea of the synthetic army really drove the Penny Project. And in a sense, Penny is about the strength and elitism of Atlas. Like, she kind of represents that. And she also represents the trickery of Atlas, you know? Because Atlas hasn't had a great history, right? Like, Atlas basically, like, invaded and colonized Vacuo for their dust and all that sort of stuff. And that has some real-world parallels, obviously. But it's sort of that might. And Penny is a representation of, you know, Atlas's favors in disguise, if that makes sense. Like, you think it's a little girl, but really it's, like, spying on you. And, you know, it's actually, like, a robot and all that stuff. It's actually, like, an army. I don't know. Like, when you think about it like that, Cinder's resentment for the military could have been built up, and Penny is a representation of all that she hates. And that would sort of tie back in with Cinder's mom, right? Because Cinder's mom was taken away for this project. You know what I mean? And so the festering hate for the military could have come from that. Like, hey, if you guys, like, didn't need to feel like you were the strongest people in all the world, like, you wouldn't have made the Penny Project, my mom never would have left, and she would have seen, like, what my family was doing. Like, that's how I could see Cinder's thought process. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, you know? But, you know, when you're, like, a kid, you may think about that irrationally, if that makes sense. You may think, oh, like, you know, this is the cause. It's, like, easy to pin the blame on that one factor. Like, the Penny Project is why my mom left, sort of thing. And so that's what Cinder's, like, line of thinking could be. That is why her mom, ended up, you know, leaving or not noticing what was happening or something like that. And here's the other thing about Penny. I think there's a very interesting connection between Penny and Cinder in a general sense, because Penny is a robot. She can be artificially strengthened and enhanced with new parts, let's just say, right? Parts can be removed, parts can be added, all that sort of stuff. And Cinder is a human, right? Obviously, Cinder is a human. The maiden powers are the strongest that Cinder can possibly get. That is the magic from the old world. That would put her at a level near Salem and Ozpin. She would be the most powerful person in all of the land, right? And so, when you think about it, I think this would be Cinder's mindset, that Penny doesn't need the fucking maiden powers, okay? Compared to Cinder, who has been deprived of strength. Like, that must infuriate her, that Penny, who is a robot who can be artificially enhanced, took the only thing that a normal human person can get to be stronger, which would be the maiden powers. You know, I think that that would be really upsetting. And imagine, then, if one of the biggest wrenches in Cinder's plan, because Cinder was supposed to take the Winter Maiden powers, right? Penny was basically like a surprise. Like, that wasn't necessarily planned for, right? If anything, you know, she thought that, oh, well, Winter may get them, but, you know, I'll stop that. Like, she didn't even consider that Penny as a possibility could take the maiden powers, right? And so imagine if one of the biggest wrenches in Cinder's Atlas plan was created by her own mother, like, you know, helping Pietro. Does that make sense? Like, to me, that's a crazy connection. And so to, you know, circle it all back, it's like, Penny was created by Pietro with the help of Cinder's own mother. And Cinder's mother working on the Penny Project in the first place would have built up Cinder's resentment and led her on the path to Salem. And now, as Cinder is as an adult and, like, her mother's gone or dead, I don't know, like, Penny comes back to take the last thing that Cinder wanted. You know what I mean? Like, Penny took the first thing away from Cinder that started it all, and now she's taking the last thing away from Cinder, the last thing that Cinder wanted as part of the plan. They got the relic, the last thing she wanted for the Atlas plan was the maiden powers. That would be kind of crazy, right? That would be kind of crazy. But I actually really like that idea. And so, you know, Cinder and Penny would have a very interesting connection. And they already have an interesting connection because, as I said, Penny getting the Winter Maiden powers and what Cinder thinks about strength and all that stuff. And then seeing as Penny is a robot. Like, there's already a lot of implications there. But if this lady was Cinder's mom, it would be even more so. So the last thing I want to talk about is Watts, because if this is true, Watts would have known Cinder's mother, and so here's my thing, right? He shits on Cinder, right? Watts treats Cinder like crap. Like, he constantly, like, belittles her and condescends her, right? But he treats Tyrion with some equal level of respect. And we see the contrast in how Cinder was treated by Watts in Volume 5 to how Tyrion is treated now. And I find that very interesting. And so if this theory is true, Watts worked with Cinder's mother. And I've always wondered, like, how did Salem even find Cinder, right? Because we know how Salem found Tyrion. I'm assuming that Watts was working with Salem first, and he still had, like, access to some stuff in Atlas. And so we knew the prison transfer was gonna happen, and then Tyrion got, like, selected, or whatever. Tyrion got saved by Salem. And so when you think about it like that, everyone has sort of a logical explanation for how how Salem approached them, I should say. So Salem approached Watts after it was publicized, right, that he was disgraced. After that was made public, Salem, like, sought him out basically and was like, hey, wanna work with me? Tyrion, it's the same thing. That was information that wasn't necessarily public, but Salem had access to. As far as we know, Cinder is basically a nobody, so how did she come to find Salem, right? It would be really weird if Watts and Cinder had this connection of Watts working with Cinder's mother, and somehow Watts was the one who suggested Cinder in the first place. Like, that's the only other thing I can think of, right? Like, of being like, like, you know, my coworker has this daughter who is, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Like, who has all this anger and resentment for her mother. Maybe you can do something with that. Like, I don't know, that just seems so weird. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, can Salem just sense a negative energy? Was she just like, ooh, I sense an angry child out there somewhere who has, like, you know, a hunger for power and has been abused by her family, right? So I'm just sort of like, like, how did she find Cinder? And so wouldn't it be interesting if Watts and Cinder's mother worked together and somehow Watts, like, suggested that? I don't know. What if Watts is the evil stepfather, guys? Like, what if Watts is Cinder's stepfather? You know, because he sort of acts in this condescending way that could be very Cinderella-esque, right? So what if Watts and Cinder's mother had a thing, and, you know, they split up because the mother supported Pietro over him, and then she had the baby, and, like, that was the whole thing. Like, what if that is the whole thing, instead of Jacques being the father? What if Watts is the father? What if Watts is Cinder's father, guys? I don't know about that. Anyway, but I thought I'd bring it up, because, like, that would be pretty crazy. And that would sort of fit, too, because then Watts is, like, the evil stepfather, and he, I don't know, he kind of is. With how he talks to Cinder sometimes, he is a little bit. Anyway, that's the connection that I made. So it would be interesting if, again, Watts worked with Cinder's mom and that had some sort of, like, domino effect or something. So anyway, we're done this video now. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Comment down below with what you guys think, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!